Joining us now live from Atlanta is Dr. Ford Vox. He's a specialist in physical medicine, and he also writes about Ebola. Thank you for coming in.
Good day, Jessica.
Wanted to start by asking you about this latest move by the government of Sierra Leone, which has now made a new policy to allow families to take care of their sick family members in the home. They just say there's not enough beds to take care of them at these health facilities, but it seems to me that that could actually increase the outbreak.
Well, it certainly does pose a risk to the families in those homes. There is a bit of a trade-off going on here. But at this point, we have seen a number of scenarios where quite deathly ill people with bodily fluids to spare are being brought to facilities which can barely care for them. People are dying on the doorsteps of hospitals and clinics in that area. Therefore, perhaps we are chancing spreading the virus on the way getting to a clinic that can offer no aid.
What about Liberia? They're finding themselves in a similar situation, and the U.S. is now sending about 400,000 protection suits. There are a number of countries sending aid to West Africa, including China. But how do we make sure that it gets there, especially into these local villages, and in particular if they're treating their own loved ones at home?
That's right. We have received some troubling reports of diversions of this aid. I think people engaged in such activities need to know that there is the force of international law, perhaps, that this is a global problem. We all have quite an interest in this. I think that U.S. aid agencies and others certainly need to gather evidence of anyone who's trying to block the proper delivery of these supplies. It's very basic equipment that is required. Contact guard precautions, the gowns and gloves are critical, the chlorine, and simply hydration fluids and temperature control. These are the aid that's desperately needed.
I want to talk to you about these new airport screenings that the United States is just implementing today through next week. There's going to be 4 more airports that start it next week. But I wonder, you had characterized this when you first heard it announced as, quote, better late than never on your Twitter feed. If you were in charge of implementing the airport screening, how soon after these first cases were reported in March would you have begun screening?
I do share the opinion of many Americans and many American politicians at this point that this is a step of surveillance that it should have occurred sometime earlier, perhaps in the summer when it was clear that this was becoming an epidemic in West Africa. We did see a CNN correspondent, Elizabeth Cohen herself, was aghast when she arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport here in Atlanta. She was asked at that time by a Customs and Border Protection agent about her travel. She reiterated that she had just been to Liberia and was reporting on Ebola. Nothing further was asked of her. She received no temperature check. She wasn't given any accurate description of the virus. In fact, that agent just said, I think I heard an email about that, and perhaps you should watch out for symptoms of Ebola, but he wasn't even able to describe those symptoms.
Wow, that certainly says a lot right there. Now that these screenings are beginning, though, the CDC is telling journalists they only expect to actually screen about 150 people a day. So I guess that begs the question, really, is a lot of this response really just about a psychological reassurance for the American people and those who use American airports?
We have seen some critique based on the fact that these screenings have been ineffective in some other viruses. For example, some of the avian influenza spread. This is rather a slow and plodding virus. It does typically infect 1 to 2 other people than the original person infected. We have not actually tried airport screening before for something like Ebola that's spread by contact. I actually do think that it may have a better chance in that sense. In terms of it just being a placebo effect for Americans, sure, that is possible. However, I do think there's a large kinesthetic effect and mental reminder for people coming in from West Africa. When you arrive in the United States and a customs agent asks you about symptoms of Ebola, checks your temperature, gives you a form, that might tick something off rolling in your brain. And when you do have symptoms, you may present sooner perhaps than Thomas Duncan did.
Well, we'll have to see how many possible Ebola cases they're able to locate with this technique. We'll be watching. Our thanks to you, Dr. Ford Vox from Atlanta, Georgia, joining us this evening.